Everyone told Sarah that once her husband quit drinking, his memory would come back. The doctor said give it time. Family said he just needs to detox. But 6 months sober, and he still couldn't remember their grandson's name or manage simple tasks. Sarah learned the hard truth about alcohol dementia. Quitting stops further damage, but it can't undo what's already been destroyed. If you're expecting sobriety to reverse cognitive problems, you need to hear this. Today, I'm sharing what Sarah wished she'd known about alcohol dementia, why good intentions and sobriety sometimes aren't enough to save the brain. Sarah's husband, Mark, was what people called a functional alcoholic for over 20 years. He held down a good job, paid the bills, and never seemed that drunk to outsiders. But Sarah watched his personality slowly change. He became more forgetful, easily confused, and started making poor decisions that had nothing to do with being intoxicated. When Mark finally got sober after a health scare, Sarah expected his mind to clear up like his blood work did. That's not what happened. His memory problems got more obvious without alcohol masking them, and new issues emerged that terrified the family. Alcohol dementia isn't just about feeling hungover, it's actual brain damage caused by years of alcohol destroying brain cells and depleting essential nutrients, particularly thiamine or vitamin B1. Unlike your liver, which can regenerate after alcohol abuse, brain cells that die from alcohol exposure are gone forever. Mark's condition is technically called alcohol-related brain damage, which includes several types. Korsakoff syndrome, sometimes called wet brain, involves severe memory problems and confabulation, unconsciously making up stories to fill memory gaps. Alcohol-related dementia affects broader thinking abilities, including planning, judgment, and problem-solving. What shocked Sarah most was learning that Mark's brain had been deteriorating for years while he was still drinking. The alcohol wasn't just impairing his thinking temporarily, it was literally killing brain tissue. Each drink contributed to permanent damage that sobriety couldn't reverse. The cruel irony is that alcohol often masks the symptoms of brain damage while it's happening. People attribute the presence of memory problems, poor judgment, and personality changes to the effects of being inebriated, not recognizing that permanent cognitive decline is occurring underneath the surface of intoxication. Sarah realized she'd been watching her husband develop dementia for years, but everyone, including his doctors, focused on his drinking problem rather than the brain damage it was causing. Mark's neurologist ordered an MRI 6 months into his sobriety, and the results devastated Sarah. The scans showed significant brain shrinkage, particularly in areas responsible for memory and executive function. This damage happened over years, the doctor explained. Sobriety will prevent more damage, but it can't restore dead brain tissue. Alcohol destroys the brain through multiple mechanisms that other organs can survive. It directly kills neurons, disrupts the blood-brain barrier, causes inflammation, and depletes thiamine, a vitamin essential for brain function. Without thiamine, brain cells literally starve to death, particularly in memory centers. The brain damage from chronic alcohol use is different from other types of dementia. While Alzheimer's involves protein buildup and tangles, alcohol dementia results from cell death and brain shrinkage. Sarah learned that Mark's brain was actually smaller than it should be for his age, a permanent change that explained why his thinking abilities couldn't improve with sobriety alone. Some alcohol-related cognitive problems are reversible in early sobriety. Attention, processing speed, and some memory functions can improve as the brain recovers from chronic intoxication. But severe deficits like Mark's represent permanent damage that occurred when alcohol repeatedly deprived his brain of oxygen and nutrients. Sarah struggled with guilt, wondering if earlier intervention could have prevented Mark's condition. The neurologist explained that once significant brain atrophy occurs, the damage is irreversible. Mark's 20 years of heavy drinking had crossed a line from which his brain couldn't return. The most heartbreaking aspect for Sarah was understanding that Mark's cognitive abilities would likely continue declining even with sobriety. Alcohol had accelerated aging in his brain, creating dementia-like symptoms that would worsen over time, regardless of his continued abstinence from drinking. Looking back, Sarah realizes the warning signs were there long before Mark got sober, but everyone attributed them to his drinking rather than brain damage. The first sign was memory gaps that seemed like typical blackouts, but occurred even when Mark wasn't heavily intoxicated. Mark would forget entire conversations, important appointments, or family events, then seem genuinely confused when reminded. Sarah thought this was just drunk behavior, not realizing his brain was losing the ability to form new memories even during relatively sober periods. Confabulation became obvious during Mark's early sobriety. He'd tell detailed stories about events that never happened, not intentionally lying, but genuinely believing his fabricated memories. Sarah would correct him, leading to arguments because Mark was convinced his version was true. This wasn't deception. His damaged brain was unconsciously filling memory gaps with invented information. Executive function problems masked as inebriated decisions became apparent when Mark remained sober. He couldn't plan simple tasks, follow multi-step instructions, or make reasonable judgments about money or safety. Sarah had blamed alcohol for these issues, not realizing permanent brain damage was affecting his decision-making abilities. Before we continue with the remaining warning signs, if this information is helping you understand alcohol's impact on the brain or recognize patterns you've been attributing to drinking behavior, please hit that subscribe button. Sarah wishes she'd understood these signs earlier, and your support helps other families access this crucial information. Personality changes that seemed alcohol-related persisted into sobriety. Mark became more childlike, lost social filters, and couldn't understand complex emotional situations. Sarah expected his personality to return to normal without alcohol, but brain damage had altered his fundamental character traits permanently. Physical coordination problems that appeared to be drunk clumsiness continued after Mark stopped drinking. His gait became unsteady, his hands trembled, and he struggled with fine motor tasks. Sarah learned these were neurological symptoms of brain damage, not just alcohol-induced impairment. The most telling sign was Mark's lack of insight into his cognitive problems. He insisted he was fine and became angry when Sarah suggested he needed help with tasks he could no longer manage safely. This inability to recognize his own limitations is common in alcohol dementia and creates dangerous situations. Sarah spent months fighting with doctors who focused exclusively on Mark's addiction recovery without addressing his cognitive decline. The medical system treated his sobriety as success, dismissing his ongoing memory and thinking problems as normal recovery or dry drunk syndrome. Addiction counselors told Sarah that Mark needed time to heal and that his brain would recover with continued sobriety. While this is true for many cognitive effects of alcohol, it doesn't apply to permanent brain damage like Mark had sustained. The addiction treatment model emphasizes hope and recovery, making it difficult to acknowledge when damage is irreversible. Family members insisted that Mark just needed to try harder to remember things or focus better on tasks. They couldn't understand that brain damage had made these abilities impossible, not just difficult. Sarah felt caught between supporting Mark's sobriety and acknowledging his cognitive disabilities. The confusion stems from alcohol's complex effects on the brain. Early in recovery, many cognitive functions do improve as alcohol toxicity clears. Sleep improves, attention spans increase, and some memory functions return. This early improvement creates false hope that all cognitive problems will resolve with time. Sarah learned that distinguishing between reversible alcohol effects and permanent brain damage requires specialized neuropsychological testing that most addiction programs don't provide. Standard addiction assessments focus on substance use patterns, not cognitive functioning, missing the diagnosis of alcohol dementia entirely. Insurance barriers complicated proper evaluation. Mark's coverage included addiction treatment, but not comprehensive neurological assessment. Sarah had to fight for approval and pay significant out-of-pocket costs for the testing that revealed the extent of his brain damage. Healthcare providers often lack training in alcohol-related brain damage, focusing on liver disease, heart problems, and addiction without considering cognitive consequences. Sarah wishes someone had explained that Mark's brain was at risk for permanent damage, not just temporary impairment from drinking. Based on Sarah's experience and what I've learned from other families dealing with alcohol dementia, here are the realities you need to understand if you're in a similar situation. First, accept that alcohol dementia is a form of brain injury, not a behavioral choice. Mark can't try harder to remember things or focus more on tasks any more than someone with a stroke can will their paralyzed limb to move. Sarah had to grieve the loss of her husband's cognitive abilities while supporting his continued sobriety. Second, understand that caregiving someone with alcohol dementia combines the challenges of dementia care with the complexities of addiction recovery. Traditional dementia resources often don't address the shame, stigma, and family dynamics surrounding alcohol-related brain damage. Sarah felt judged by other caregivers who saw Mark's condition as self-inflicted. Third, continued sobriety is essential for preventing further brain damage, even though it won't reverse existing damage. Mark's abstinence from alcohol slows his cognitive decline and prevents additional brain cell death. Sarah learned to celebrate sobriety as protecting what cognitive function remained, not expecting dramatic improvement. Fourth, safety planning requires different considerations than typical dementia care. People with alcohol dementia may have better physical abilities than other dementia patients, but poor judgment about alcohol access. Sarah had to secure not just Mark's environment, but also remove all alcohol from places he might impulsively drink. Fifth, connect with resources that understand both addiction and brain injury. Sarah found the most help from traumatic brain injury support groups rather than traditional Alzheimer's resources. The combination of cognitive impairment with addiction history requires specialized understanding and support. Finally, prepare for a different trajectory than typical dementia. Alcohol dementia may progress more slowly than Alzheimer's disease, but often includes behavioral issues related to poor impulse control and judgment. Sarah learned to manage both cognitive decline and the ongoing risk of relapse that could accelerate Mark's brain damage. The key message Sarah wants other families to understand is that loving someone with alcohol dementia means accepting both their disease and their cognitive disability while supporting their recovery as much as possible. Sarah continues caring for Mark 3 years into his sobriety. His cognitive abilities haven't improved, but his continued abstinence from alcohol has slowed his decline. Some days are harder than others, but Sarah has found peace in understanding the medical reality of his condition rather than hoping for impossible recovery. I've put together additional alcohol dementia resources in the description below, including information about brain injury support services and questions to ask healthcare providers if you're dealing with cognitive problems related to alcohol use. What resonates most with your experience? Are you seeing cognitive problems that persist after sobriety, or struggling to get medical professionals to take alcohol-related brain damage seriously? Share your story in the comments. Your experience helps other families understand what they might be facing. If this video helped you understand why quitting alcohol doesn't always reverse brain damage, please subscribe for more honest information about dementia and cognitive health from someone who understands these complex journeys. For more information about other types of dementia and their causes, watch this video about Alzheimer's and other dementias. And if you want to learn about the early signs of dementia, this video will provide guidance. I'll see you there.